Miss Julie takes place in the kitchen of the Count's Manor House in Sweden on a midsummer eve in the 1880s. In the stage directions, Strindberg describes the kitchen in great detail. A statue of Cupid, perched on a fountain, is visible through a set of glass doors. Christine, the Manor's 35-year-old cook, is frying something at the stove when Jean, the Manor's 30-year-old valet, enters. He says Miss Julie, the Count's daughter, is wild tonight. Julie, aged 25, led the local barn dance that evening and chosen for the ladies' waltz. Christine observes that Miss Julie has been especially rambunctious in the wake of her broken engagement. Unable to face her family after this disgrace, Julie has remained on the manor with the servants for the midsummer eve festivities. According to Jean, Miss Julie's fiancé abandoned her after her attempt to train him by making him jump over her riding whip in the barnyard as she beat him. Jean saw the abuse. Jean thinks the man fundamentally good, if not rich. The man ultimately tore the whip from Miss Julie's hands, breaking it into pieces. Christine serves Jean kidney from the frying pan, and Jean takes a bottle of red wine from a drawer. They flirt. It is revealed that Jean and Christine are engaged. Jean asks Christine what else she is cooking. Stench is awful. Christine is making something for Miss Julie's sick dog, Diana, which recently got pregnant by the gatekeeper's mongrel. Miss Julie is irate at the pregnancy. Jean says Miss Julie is too stuck up in some ways and not proud enough in others, just like her mother. The Countess felt comfortable in the kitchen or among the cows, but had to have a pair of driving horses. Her sleeves were filthy, but her buttons were immaculate. Nevertheless, Jean finds Miss Julie beautiful. Miss Julie enters and asks Christine if she has finished the meal. Jean suddenly becomes polite and charming, asking if the women are sharing secrets and inquiring if they are preparing a witch's brew in which to see the face of Miss Julie's future husband. Miss Julie invites Jean to dance. He hesitates, telling her that he has already promised to dance to Christine and warning her against the dangers of local gossip. Miss Julie finds his hesitation preposterous. She is mistress of the house and wants to dance with its best dancer. Beneficently telling Jean that rank does not matter this evening, she walks out to the party on his arm. The backdrop of Miss Julie is Midsummer Eve, a festival of pagan origins, celebrated in Northern Europe. A number of critics have related the paganism of the festival to the lust of the protagonists. The pagan festival, a pause in regular provincial life, is an occasion for disguise and deception, the crossing of social boundaries, and rebellion against moral stricture. It is appropriate that Midsummer Eve is the setting of Miss Julie and Jean's liaison, an encounter that crosses class lines. The play's investment in Miss Julie's degeneracy and ruin is clear from the outset. The portrait we get of Miss Julie through gossip shows the major motifs that shadow her character. Strindberg's interest in contemporary psychology emerges in the first scene. His heroine is portrayed as sick, probably sick, in the manner of female hysterics of Strindberg's day. Jean introduces Miss Julie as a woman who dreams of dominating men, subjecting them like dogs to her sadistic will. Her fiancé rejects her because of urges, and she must stay home with the servants in disgrace. The story of the training session is a fantasy of unmanning the unruly heroine. Her fiancé, a man with whom Jean clearly sympathizes, breaks her riding crop. The crop is a phallic symbol, and when her fiancé breaks it, he breaks Julie's masculine power. The play disapproves of Julie's impulse to wield power and prefers her to abuse herself rather than others. We are meant to associate Julie's dog with Julie herself. The dog, as coupled with a mongrel, just as her sex-hungry mistress, does not care about the class of the man she wants to seduce. As Jean's first lines indicate, Miss Julie is wild, dancing scandalously with the peasants in the barn. Miss Julie is meant to stand for modern women in general. When Jean tells the story of her broken engagement, he says, "Well, that's a woman for you," which suggests that Julie's behavior is typical of a woman. Miss Julie is a case study of a degenerate woman who supposedly embodies all women. This case study is Strindberg's famous experiment in the naturalistic character. To some extent, Strindbergian naturalism is inseparable from Strindbergian misogyny. These misogynist fantasies primarily find voice through Jean. In these first scenes, a motif that will become appears in his speech, the simultaneous idealization and degradation of woman. Jean describes Julie and her mother as both proud and crude. Miss Julie is cruder than the average servant. The Countess's degraded nature manifests as the dirt on her sleeves. This is an image of filth typical to the play. Such images recur to indicate female degradation. Still, Jean is mesmerized by Julie, saying, "But she is beautiful. Magnificent. Ah, those shoulders, and so forth, and so forth." Jean's conflicting feelings for Julie are complicated by his being not just a man relating to a woman, but a servant relating to a mistress. Much of Miss Julie comes from the servant's perspective, the servant positioned to see the undesirable sides of their supposedly superior masters. This degradation is not really about class subversion, but about misogyny. Jean's humiliation of Julie relies on an assertion of female degeneracy. In the context of this play, Jean is superior to Julie because he is a man, a superiority he can use to combat her superiority to him in terms of class. A pantomime occurs. Humming in time with the music, Christine cleans up after Jean, does the dishes, curls her hair, and plays with Miss Julie's handkerchief. Jean enters alone, howling once again that Miss Julie is wild. Christine attributes her behavior to the fact that she has her period. Christine and Jean are flirt when Miss Julie enters. Julie is unpleasantly surprised at finding them together. She teases Jean with forced gaiety and then, in a different tone, orders him to take off his livery. While Jean dresses in another room, Miss Julie asks Christine if Jean is her fiancée. Christine says, "I suppose so. At least that's what we say." Jean returns in his black coat. Miss Julie compliments him in French, and to her surprise Jean replies in French, which she learned in Switzerland. Jean was born in the local district. His father worked as a farmhand on the estate next to Miss Julie's. Jean even remembers seeing Julie when she was a child. Christine falls asleep next to the stove. Miss Julie invites Jean to sit. He refuses until Julie teasingly commands him. Jean serves her a beer, and Julie invites him to have one too. Under Julie's orders, Jean kneels in mock gallantry and toasts his mistress. He hesitates, then boldly kisses her foot. Rising, Jean insists that this flirtation must stop, since they could be discovered at any moment. Miss Julie feigns innocence, protesting that Christine is with him anyway. Rudely, she moves to wake the cook, who battles about her housework in her sleep. Jean chastises her. Taking a new tack, Julie compliments the valet for his kindness and asks him to pick some lilacs with her. Christine shuffles off to bed. Jean refuses. Julie teases him, wondering if his imagination has perhaps gotten the better of him. She declares that she is climbing down. To her, everything is scum, drifting and drifting on the water until it sinks. She relates a dream in which she sits atop a pillar, wanting to fall but lacking the courage to jump. Julie knows she will have no peace until she gets down. Julie continues, "And if I ever got down on the ground, I'd want to go farther down, right down into the earth." Jean has dreamed he lies under a tall tree, wanting to get to the top to rob a nest of its golden eggs. He knows if he can reach the first branch he could succeed, but never reaches it. Julie invites him out again. Romantically, Jean suggests that they sleep on 9 midsummer flowers so that their dreams come true. Jean gets a speck of dust in his eye, and Julie moves to remove the speck with her handkerchief. She feels his arms and Jean warns her. "Attention. Jeannie sus quam. Be careful. I'm only a man." Julie commands him to kiss her hand and thank him. Jean warns her again. Julie mocks him for imagining himself as a Don Juan or Joseph. Jean kisses Julie and she slaps him. Frustrated, Jean returns to shining the Count's boots. Julie commands him to stop and asks if he has ever been in love. He replies that once he got sick with love. Julie presses him to reveal the object of his love, insisting that she asks as an equal. Jean reveals that he loved her. Miss Julie begins to play the coquette, intent on teasing and ridiculing Jean, but ostensibly not wanting anything else. Thus she feigns innocence when he alludes to the party nearby and the danger of gossip, mocks Jean for his presumption, and taunts him for thinking himself a Don Juan or Joseph. The reference to Joseph involves the story of Potiphar's wife, who attempted to seduce a young slave and cried rape when he refused her. By calling Jean Joseph, Julie aligns herself with Potiphar's wife. She is portrayed as a devious, fickle temptress. The stage directions note her slyly, changing tack. She pettily exerts her rank over Jean and displays jealousy toward his would-be fiancé. The misogyny of this characterization is hardly subtle. Strindberg makes his women characters misogynist, too. Christine attributes Julie's wild behavior to her menstrual cycle. This sequence is meant to assure the audience that Julie is asking for her own room. She admits to a masochistic desire for her own room. As her dream suggests, she wants to climb down. Already we begin to sense that Julie's fall is inevitable. In her dream, she goes right down into the earth to find peace. Such masochism is what makes her a difficult and fascinating character. We worry about her and wonder at her behavior, but cannot look away. Jean appears to be at the mercy of Julie's wiles, hesitant in his lust, and eager to maintain decorum and warn her of the consequences of flirtation. Jean's unheeded warnings further underline Julie's responsibility for her public room. Jean also engages in a show of mock gallantry at his mistress's request, speaking French, feigning sophistication in his speech, and staging a sentimental scene of seduction, even kissing her foot. Julie is delighted by Jean's performance and tells him he should have been an actor. Jean and Julie begin donning personas, playing at being master and servant. This scene does suggest that a real romance could build between Jean and Julie and that they could complement each other. Their dreams complement each other. Julie yearns to climb down from her pillar and Jean wishes to climb up to the next. In order for the complementary dreams to work together, Julie must degrade herself. In terms of dramaturgical form, this section of the play is notable for its use of pantomime. Christine's tasks introduce an aspect of real time into the play, important to Strindbergian naturalism. We watch this interlude while Jean and Julie dance off stage. Jean recounts a childhood memory of Miss Julie. He begins by asking rhetorically if Miss Julie knows what the world looks like from below. Jean grew up with 7 siblings on a wasteland with a count's garden and apple trees, like a garden of Eden, visible from their window. He confesses that he and the other boys found a way to the tree of life. Julie says, all boys steal apples. One day, Jean caught sight of a Turkish pavilion, that is, an outhouse surrounded by jasmine and honeysuckle. Jean did not know what it was, but thought the building beautiful. One day he snuck in. He heard someone coming and got out of the outhouse through the bottom. Jean ran until coming upon the rose terrace. There he caught sight of Miss Julie. Buried under thistles and stinking dirt, Jean watched Julie walk among the roses, wondering why he, a poor boy, could not play with Julie. Miss Julie is moved, wondering sentimentally if all poor children feel as Jean did. With exaggerated pain, Jean affirms her suspicion and continues. He says he tossed himself into the millstream but was fished out by his family. The following Sunday, Jean went to church, determined to see Miss Julie once more and then die. Recalling that it was fatal to sleep under an alder bush, Jean made himself a bed of alder leaves in a bin of oats and climbed inside. He was rescued and quickly recovered. Miss Julie compliments Jean on his storytelling, asking him if he went to school. Jean says he listens to the educated and has even heard Miss Julie at her most vulgar. Miss Julie protests, saying at least people of her class do not behave as he does when engaged. Jean tells her that she cannot play the innocent with him. Jean decides to go to bed. Still moved, Julie asks him to take her out to the lake. Again, Jean warns her of the injury to her reputation and urges her to go to bed. Guests are heard approaching, singing a folk song about 2 women. Miss Julie stands firm, convinced that the peasants love her. Jean tells her that they are singing a dirty song about the 2 of them. Jean suggests that they flee to his room, swearing, at Julie's insistence, that he will behave in a gentlemanly fashion. The 2 exit. A ballet ensues, in which the peasants drink and dance around the kitchen, singing the folk song and wreaking havoc. Julie enters alone, surveys the kitchen, and powders her face. Jean follows, in high spirits. Jean says that because of the crowd's rumors, it is impossible to stay at the manor. He dreams of traveling to Como in northern Italy and setting up a first-class hotel. Miss Julie will be the queen of the office, commanding her slaves. Julie begs Jean to declare his love for her and invites him to call her by her first name. It is clear that she has fallen for him. Jean cannot love her as long as they remain in the house. The specter of the Count weighs on him too heavily. He dreams of fleeing to a republic and perhaps becoming a count himself one day. Julie cares little for his plans. She only wants to be with him. Jean declares that they must be calm. He decides, to Julie's anguish, that they must behave as if nothing has happened. Julie asks if he will need money for his plan. She cannot help, she reveals, for she is penniless. After a brief pause, Jean announces that the plans are off. Suddenly it is clear that he wanted her for her money. Julie becomes hysterical, wondering how she can stay on with everyone sneering at her behind her back. Jean is cynical and unsympathetic. When Julie accuses him of vulgarity, he retorts that she cannot play the fine lady with him and that they are now eating off the same platter. He takes out the bottle of Burgundy he stole from the wine cellar and Julie calls him a petty house thief. Jean calls her a whore. Cruelly, the increasingly sleepy Jean reveals that when he first saw her on the rose terrace, his mind was full of dirty thoughts. He also stole the story of the oat bin from some newspaper article. He says he told her these stories to win her over. Jean says Julie is of the same class as animals and prostitutes. Julie submits to his abuse. Jean slept with Julie too easily and is disappointed to see his ideal fallen. Suddenly becoming passionate again, Jean resumes his seduction, complimenting her beauty and refinement and lamenting that she could never love him. Julie is unmoved but cannot tear herself from him. Jean proposes anew that they flee together. Julie pauses, she wants to tell him her life before they become traveling companions. Jean warns her against confessing her secrets. After Julie and Jean have sex, their idyllic fantasy of Italian summers quickly becomes an ugly unmasking of Jean's intentions. Transformed from mistress, as in woman of the house, to mistress, as in concubine, Julie finds herself sinking in awful filth. She wonders at her own behavior. Faced with Jean's accusation that she has acted like a beast in a war, Julie is prostrate, masochistically imploring her servant to at once punish her and help her. She simultaneously hates and desires her lover. Julie's submission to Jean reflects Strindberg's notions of evolution. He suggests that Julie must fall to Jean because women are men's evolutionary inferiors. This mythical conception of evolution is central to each of the characters' fates. As Strindberg notes in the preface to Miss Julie, he has added a little evolutionary history to the play by making the weaker steal and repeat the words of the stronger. The play takes pleasure in Julie's humiliation. We find ourselves in a bind, too, because although we may find ourselves sympathizing with Julie, that sympathy is characteristic of the sadistic Jean. He pities Julie as we probably do. Class conflict persists, a conflict also informed by Strindberg's understanding of evolutionary history. The play imagines servants imitating and aspiring to become their masters. Jean's dreams of being a count himself one day reflect Strindberg's idea that strong people want to clamber up some evolutionary ladder. Though Jean abuses his mistress here, declaring that they now eat on the same platter, he remains aware of his lower status. Still, Julie has put herself at his mercy by sleeping with him. When she insults Jean, he can retort that whatever he is, she is worse, for she has slept with a man she insults. In his fantasies of Como, Jean initially imagines Miss Julie as a slave mistress, and then appears to mourn genuinely the loss of Julie as his idealized class superior. Though relations of power have reversed between Jean and Julie, fantasies of the class structure persist in the background. Jean's inferior class position will continually compromise his apparent mastery over the fallen Julie. Jean, unable to fully command Julie, describes the effects of the Count's authority. I've only got to see the Count's gloves lying on the table and I shrivel up. I only have to hear that bell ring and I shy like a frightened horse. I only have to look at his boots standing there so stiff and proud and I feel my spine bending. Jean is sent into instant submission by a physical reminder of his master's presence. The symbols of the Count unman Jean. He shrivels up, reduced into a workhorse, and then his spine. He reacts to the Count in what Strindberg likely means for us to see as a feminine manner. Julie divulges her family's past. Her mother was born to commoners and grew up to believe in equality, the independence of women, and all that. Though averse to marriage, Julie's mother married the Count and raised Julie as a nature child. Julie had to learn everything boys did. With the men and women having switched roles, the estate fell into ruin and public disgrace. Julie's father rebelled and took command. Julie's mother inexplicably fell ill and took to spending her nights outside. Then a mysterious fire burned down the estate. The Countess suggested that the Count borrow money from a friend of hers to rebuild the farm. Jean thinks it is obvious that Julie's mother set the fire and the friend was her lover. Upon discovering the Countess's revenge plot, the Count attempted suicide but ultimately rallied to make his wife suffer for her treachery. Unknowingly, Julie took her mother's side in their marital strife and grew up to hate men as her mother did. Jean points out that Julie got engaged. Julie says she just wanted to enslave him and ultimately got bored. Jean mocks her with the truth. Julie's fiancé rejected her. Julie wants Jean killed like an animal. However, the two revive their plans to flee. Julie dreams of enjoying themselves for as long as they can, and then dying together. Jean has no intention of dying, and reveals that Como is a stinking hole, only good for tourists and their short-lived romances. Jean moves to go to bed. When Julie points out his debt to her, he tosses her a silver coin. Julie invokes the law's protection for young maidens. Jean retorts that she is lucky there is no law against seductresses. Julie wants to flee, marry, and divorce. Jean suggests he might refuse her hand. After all, he has better ancestors than Julie. He is sick of her entreaties. His own people do not behave so wildly. He tells her she is sick. Julie begs him to help her, to tell her what to do. First he advises that she stay. Julie says their liaison might continue on with more severe consequences, alluding to the absent Count. Stunned, Jean immediately commands her to flee. Julie protests that she cannot leave by herself. She submits completely. Tell me what to do. Order me. Disgusted, Jean obliges, commanding her to get dressed, collect traveling money, and prepare for her departure. Julie begs him to join her in her room. He refuses. Strindberg's misogyny is apparent in Julie's continued humiliation. Her mother's feminist ideas are portrayed as unquestionably abhorrent and her treachery as a familiar story. Julie is supposedly lucky that the law does not arrest hemtresses. Jean thinks Julie is sick, a diagnosis we are meant to agree with. This scene blames Miss July's illness on her family history, laying the blame at the feet of her mother. Strindberg was interested in psychology and incorporated it into his literary and scholarly works. Miss Julie and the Countess are models of the hysteric, as popularly conceived of in the 19th century. When Strindberg wrote, hysteria was thought to be a female disease. The word hysteria is derived from the Greek word for womb, hystera. In antiquity and beyond, people believed in specious disorders and demon possession of the female reproductive system. In Strindberg's day, hysteria, though a hotly contested disease, increasingly came to refer not only to theories of innate degeneracy, but to sexual disturbances. Specifically, it was thought that women became hysterics when they failed or refused to accept their sexual desires. Physicians defined this as the failure to become a sexual object for a man. Julie appears torn between her hatred and disgust for men and an irresistible attraction to them. She attempts to enslave and even destroy men, but she submits to Jean. Her desperate plea for Jean to accompany her to her bedroom is meant to demonstrate her feminine masochism. July's paralysis is another symptom of her hysteria. After sleeping with Jean, she is portrayed as totally without will, unable to think for herself. The play explains July's state as a product of her mother's influence. The Countess suffered from a masculinity complex, a charge leveled against feminists from Strindberg's day to the present, usurping her husband's authority and disastrously attempting to reverse gender roles on the estate. She raised Julie just like a boy, making her a mannish woman and teaching her to hate men. Julie became bent on revenging herself on men and bringing ruin to the paternal household. Her mother's influence has divided her from her supposedly appropriate desires. Along with providing July's family history, this scene continues to develop the theme of class, particularly in relation to genealogy. At one point, teasing Julie with a threat of rejecting her hand in marriage, Jean declares his family line superior to his mistress's. "I don't have any ancestors at all," he cries. "But I can become an ancestor myself." Jean fantasizes about making himself free of all ties of kin and breaking the bonds of his servitude. In a pantomime, Jean does some calculations in a notebook, and Christine enters, carrying a shift and tie. Christine gasps at the mess. Jean blames it on Miss Julie. Christine reminds Jean that he promised to join her at church this morning. The sermon today is on the beheading of John the Baptist. Jean gets dressed. Christine asks why he was up all night, and Jean confesses to sleeping with Miss Julie. Christine is more disgusted than jealous, deciding that she cannot remain in the house any longer. When one's superiors are no better than oneself, there is little point in trying to emulate them. Christine expresses disbelief that Miss Julie was been so proud about men, even having her dog Diana shot for copulating with a mongrel. Christine thinks it is time that Jean finds a better position if they are to marry. A doorkeeping or caretaking job would provide a steady income and pension. Jean has no intention of sacrificing himself or family. The two hear sounds upstairs and realize that the Count has come back. Christine exits. The sun rises, marking the end of Midsummer's Eve. Dressed for travel, Miss Julie enters with a small urge. Jean remarks that she is white as a ghost and has dirt on her face. Julie again begs Jean to join her, fearing the memories that will haunt her on her journey. Jean agrees. When Miss Julie moves to bring her canary, Serena, Jean insists that she leave it behind. Julie would rather see the bird dead than entrusted to another. Jean offers to kill it. He decapitates it on a chopping block. "Kill me too," screams Julie. As Jean urges Julie to go, she approaches the chopping block, mesmerized. She hears a carriage approaching. Suddenly she exclaims that she wants to see Jean's head on a chopping block and his entire sex swimming in blood. She asks how Jean could presume that would bear his child and take his name. Julie calls him a dog with her name on your collar, a lackey with her initials on your buttons. She pledges to stay, to wait for her father to discover his bureau robbed, and then to confess everything to the sheriff. She says the Count will die. Her father's coat of arms will die with him, and Jean's family line will end in the orphanage, gutter, and jail. This sequence functions as another unmasking. Miss Julie fantasizes about men's annihilation, and fantasy that shows her at her most violent, desperate, morbid, and monstrous. This fantasy is sparked by a scene of decapitation, a scene that links to Christine's mention of the execution of Saint John the Baptist. Unlike the biblical allegory, however, which imagines a man symbolically castrated by a conspiracy of women, the execution in Miss Julie is of a female bird that stands for her female mistress, which reverses the gender roles of the Saint John story. In July's story, the symbolic castration is of a woman already established as inappropriately masculine. The story of St. John's execution revolves around Salome, the daughter of Herodias and King Herod. King Herod had arrested John for his public invectives against the king's adultery and his urgings for the people to revolt. On his birthday feast, Herod, consumed with incestuous desire for his daughter, promises to grant Salome a wish if she performs the infamous dance of the seven veils on his behalf. She does so and, at the request of her mother, demands the head of the saint on a platter. John is executed, and Salome presents John's head to her mother. As elaborated by Freud and others, decapitation is often symbolic of castration. Thus the story of Salome has become a touchstone for fantasies of monstrous, castrating women. Both Julie and her mother are portrayed as wrathful, castrating, and monstrous women. Jean, French for John, is the would-be victim of Julie. The decapitation of the bird, however, reverses the terms of the story. Miss Julie's pet dog already stands in for Julie. The lusty dog is named Diana, ironically, for Diana is the virgin goddess. The canary, Serena, also stands in for Julie, which makes Julie the symbolic victim of this cruel execution. Julie screams for Jean to kill her too, making her identification with the bird obvious. The play inverts the gender dynamics of the biblical allegory, and the woman who would castrate becomes the castrated woman. This execution prompts Miss Julie's outburst of rage. This speech reveals the threats the degenerate Julie supposedly poses. She reveals her hatred of men in all its violence, saying she wants to see the blood and brains of all men and would love to eat their hearts. Julie's revenge fantasy also involves the derision and destruction of the proper name on which the family line depends. The name symbolizes the father's legacy, his dominance in the family, and his ownership of his wife and children. Jean's name becomes the sign of his inferior class position. Jean has no last name beyond his servile role, doorkeeper or floor sweeper. His line can only end in the orphanage, gutter, and jail. Jean cannot be a father, the ancestor of a new line. As a servant, he is a tarnished man. Because last names symbolize male authority, Julie's comment that Jean bears her name on his buttons and collar robs Jean of his manhood. At the same time, however, the initials on Jean's buttons are not really Julie's. They are the initials of Julie's father, which symbolize his ownership of Julie and Julie's mother. Julie must borrow the tool of a man in order to show Jean her superiority. In the tirade's final reversal, Julie yearns for the destruction of her father's name. She dreams of his death and the annihilation of his line. Christine enters, dressed for church and carrying a hymn book. Miss Julie throws herself into her arms, appealing to their shared womanhood for help against Jean. Christine refuses. Embarrassed, the valet withdraws to shave. Julie has an idea. The three of them can flee together and open that hotel on Lake Como. An extended fantasy of their travels and life at the hotel follows. Julie promises that they will visit the castles of Mad King Ludwig in Munich, the castles where he staged his private operas. Julie is hallucinating, and Jean begins to sharpen his razor at stage left. Miss Julie lays her head between her arms at a table. Christine chastises Jean for his plans. He commands her to respect her mistress. She says she can't anymore. Christine speaks of their redemption through Christ. Julie asks Christine who will receive the gift of God's grace. Christine responds with a platitude. Within the lash will be the first, and it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. She leaves, promising to tell the stable boy to stop any attempted departures on their part. Listlessly, Julie asks Jean what he would do if in her place. Julie picks up the razor and slashes the air. Jean approves but says that he would never do such a thing. Julie cries that she wants to but she cannot, much like her father when he failed to kill himself. Jean replies that the Count was right to fail because he needed to avenge himself first. Julie says the Countess is exacting her vengeance through Julie. Jean asks if Julie has not ever loved her father. She has, but hates him as well. He raised her to despise women, making her half woman and half man. Torn between her parents, Julie lacks a self of her own. It makes no difference, though, for she still bears all the guilt. The bell rings twice. Julie jumps up, and Jean changes his coat. The Count has returned. Jean takes up the speaking tube. The Count wants his boots and coffee in half an hour. Exhausted, Miss Julie implores, for the last time, "Help me, Jean. Command me, and I'll obey like a dog. Do me this last favor. Save my honor, save his name." Jean says he cannot, because the return of the Count has made him weak. Julie tells Jean to pretend that he is the Count, and she is Jean. She tells him to act, or to hypnotize her. Julie falls into a trance, and Jean whispers the fatal instructions in her ear. Julie wakes and thanks him. She asks Jean to tell her that the first will receive the gift of grace. He cannot promise grace but can tell her that she is definitely among the last. Suddenly she cannot go and begs him to command her anew. Jean cannot. She is taking all his strength away. Jean thinks he sees the bell move. He plugs his ears, but still hears the bell. The bell rings twice, and Jean jumps. He says, "It's horrible. But there's no other way for it to end go." Miss Julie walks out the door. Strindberg suggests that the difference between men and women is that women are masochistic and want to ruin themselves, while men are better equipped for evolution and want to survive. Although our first image of Julie is of a sadist, her sadism quickly becomes masochistic submission to an erstwhile servant. The play itself is sadistic in exacting her demise. Jean, speaking for the play, says he cannot promise her grace, but can assure her that she has moved from among the first to the very last. Though at one point Julie describes herself as half woman and half man, we should not take her words at face value. Julie is not a figure of gender indeterminacy, rather, the play rather conventionally imagines her halfness as consisting of her mother's emotions and her father's thoughts. Julie identifies with both male and female figures in the play. As she confesses, she has no self she can call her own. Part of Julie's pleasure in her pain comes from identification with the men around her. Julie's indecision over taking her life, for example, is analogous to her father's unsuccessful suicide attempt. On one level, Julie sees herself as her mother's victim, just as her father was. Julie learned to hate women from her father and to hate men from her mother. This scene links Julie's masochistic behavior to her hatred of women, a hatred her father implanted in her. It occurs to Julie to have Jean hypnotize her, and when she asks him to play the Count, it shows her desire to hurt herself and Jean's mastery over Julie. She wants to play the servant to his master. Rejecting herself across class lines, Julie identifies with a figure of the servant bowed before his master. She also transcends gender lines, wanting to imagine herself as a cowed man. A homoerotic element infuses the request. We have heard Jean say several times that he has thought of being a count someday. His performance as Count falters, however. Julie successfully imagines herself the servant, but Jean's authority over her is incomplete. Julie wakes from hypnosis and interrupts their play act. Jean finds himself in a near-hypnotic state of his own, reduced to impotence by the presence of the Count. He is paralyzed by seeing the Count's boots and hearing his voice. Though Jean ostensibly leads Julie to her death, it is clear that both characters are under a spell. Jean and Julie are under the total influence of the Count. The innumerable power reversals between Jean and Julie are reduced to a joint submission to the Count, who is master and father. Jean would follow Julie in suicide himself if the Count commanded. The Count is embodied, unseen, and unheard as a figure of supreme, magical authority. The Count's authority demands Jean's return to servitude and Julie's death. The denouement of the play is sadistic, demanding that the heroine kill herself and claiming, through Jean, that it is the only way.